Welcome to Book and Lounge. I'm your host, Jacqueline. In this episode, I'm joined by Amina, Taiwo, Yvonne, and Katrina to discuss Sankofa by Chibundu Onuzo. As we delve into the themes of the novel, we'll be discussing identity and belonging, dictatorships versus democracy in Africa, relationships and whether all men cheat, passing, the one-drop rule, and much, much more. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore Sankofa. Thank you very much for joining. So, the first thing we're going to do is just a brief, summary of what we thought about the book, whether you enjoyed it, didn't enjoy it, what you thought about it generally. And anybody can have a go to start.
I enjoyed it. I have to admit, I enjoyed it. It was an easy read, particularly after, in comparison to the last book, obviously, can't really compare it to the last book. The last book is in a different league, but compared to the last book, it's very kind of like a puff piece. Is that what it's called? A puff piece? Very light. Yeah, kind of holiday, beach kind of reading, holiday, something you'd buy in the airport if you had too much money. You decided, okay, I'll read this on the plane or on the beach, that kind of thing. Even though you guys spoiled the ending for me, I kind of forgot how the ending played out. So when I read it, I was surprised because I didn't see it coming. But then again, I've been told I'm quite naive. I like that because I actually didn't see it coming.
Okay. Although it's wanted for you.
I kind of thought, I'm not sure that I'm really into the whole circle of life thing. Although I did enjoy it. I thought it would make a good scene in a Netflix series or in a film or something. But I don't know. I think I felt a bit ambivalent about that. Okay. But I enjoyed it and it was easy to read.
Good.
I really enjoyed it, which is weird to me because it was a book where I didn't like any of the characters. I thought these were a lot of them were just kind of quite annoying or unpleasant people to spend time with. And yet the story overall worked for me. I think that's because I tend to like family kind of tales and sagas. I've realised that I'd like multi-generational stories and things that kind of explore family histories. So maybe that's what worked for me.
Okay, well, I'm really reiterating what Taiwo said. It was nice. It was just light reading that was pleasant and enjoyable, and just something you could read which you could think about some of the issues which the book might have explored a bit more, but you didn't have, there's nothing stressful about reading it.
Like the other ones that we've read before.
Unlike some of the other ones, yeah.
Okay. And Yvonne?
It was a little bit slow at the start. So I'd say the first part of the book was just I was just reading, trying to get interested, but it's really the second part of the novel. I think that sort of got me I need to read this quickly because this is, I couldn't put the second part down. The first part was just okay because, we're dealing with Anna, who's just sort of a housewife, and she's not particularly interesting. It doesn't seem. She's actually quite boring. So, and she doesn't seem to be particularly kind towards her mother or the memory of her mother at the start. But certainly the second half, the pace picks up and there's some unexpected things. I was like, oh, okay. Didn't expect this to happen. So yeah, easy to read. Enjoyed the second half more than the first.
Okay. And so if you had to use 3 words to describe the book, what 3 words would you use and why?
So what about you, Jackie? How did you find it? You're not going to answer the question.
Oh, yeah, like you guys, I thought it was an easy read. A much welcome, easy read after the last 2 books. And I started it on a Saturday, and by Friday I was done. And that despite the fact that I was actually working all week as well. She could have taken more time to explore some of the issues raised in more detail. But other than that, yeah, I was welcome. Well, as I said, a welcome break from the heavy stuff. So yes, 3 words to describe the book.
I've got 3 words. I'm going to get them in quickly before everyone else gets their words. I've got easy, I've got intriguing, and I've got unlikely. And I think most people who were born in the circumstances that Anna was born in and then trace their roots do not discover that their father was the president of anywhere. But it's interesting, but it provokes ideas. So that's the intriguing part.
I could say really the second half I found surprising and unexpected.
I'm intrigued to see that you found it unexpected, because I actually thought it was quite predictable.
The fact that she gets dragged off a plane, I thought that I didn't see that coming.
Okay.
I didn't see that coming at all. Even the part where the father, and then it turns out it's her father, I didn't see that coming either, to be honest. Maybe I'm a little bit naive,
That
but
did not surprise me at all. In fact, I knew that it was the father as soon as
the word go.
Yeah, I definitely suspected it was the father.
I guess Jackie J is the kind of person that watches a whodunit and knows who it is halfway through, and everyone else is kind of fumbling around in the dark, waiting for Poirot to gather all the potential suspects. But Jackie solved the murder.
Whodunits are my favorites, actually. I've listened to all of Poirot. I watch Midsummer Murders.
But I can't usually solve those ones. I did suspect it was him. I don't know why, but it just seemed likely to me that he was behind it.
But I guess I'd also say simple. Yeah, I thought it was a simple book.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I almost made simple one of my words. But I think the three I landed on were, I guess, contemplative, incisive, but unsatisfying.
Why was it unsatisfying? What part of it?
I felt like we sort of went on this journey, but kind of didn't dig deep enough and maybe landed somewhere a bit obvious. So, but the incisive was, I found it quite sharp at times, like in terms of its approach to the characters. And it goes back to what I was saying about them being quite unlikable. So it sort of felt like it was sort of looking at people in quite a kind of sharply focused, direct, sometimes quite funny way. Yeah, rather than sort of making them all into heroes in the story, I guess.
So my three words were different, easy, and sparse. I like the idea of the book, is that it just, this idea that you're exploring a story of someone who finds out that their father was actually a dictator. That's different. I'd not come across something similar. So I thought I found the idea intriguing, and I wanted to actually see how she would tackle it and how it all turned out. So I like the idea of the story, and I really do wish she just focused on that a bit more than she did. Quite easy to read, and the prose, I think I've already said, I found very sparse. Yeah, that's how I would describe it.
I resent the term dictator. I prefer freedom fighter.
Okay, freedom fighter. We'll come back to that. So the next section is basically a bunch of statements, and you have to say whether or not you think it's true or false, and then you have to say why you think that way. So the first one is Bahama is really Ghana. True or false?
True.
Yes.
I think it's true.
Okay.
Because I think she borrowed heavily from Ghana, having been to Ghana as well. It's in Oxford Street in Accra, and all those colourful clothing. I also have a dress from there. I mean, there's lots of things. The food, what I would think, the Cape Coast and all the castles.
Castles, yes.
Yes, the castles. So there's a lot of similarities to Ghana.
So given the fact that it's so similar to Ghana, then why do you feel that she's chosen a fictional name for the country, rather than actually just saying Ghana? Because, I mean, everything that you've described and everything that she does describe, you just read it and you think Ghana. Or is it because I know Ghana? So we know Ghana and we think that way, and someone who possibly is not familiar with Ghana wouldn't think so?
I think if you didn't know anything about Ghana, you might not make the associations. But I don't know who the book is aimed at. I'd have thought most people like ourselves who read a lot of African literature and have various connections with Africa probably would recognise it.
Yeah, so we just thought it was a bit strange that she basically shows in the fictional name.
But I wonder if a bit of that is because, I don't know if it's because of the unflattering take on what could be a Ghanaian leader, and maybe, I don't know if it's quite libelous or whatever, but maybe she doesn't want people drawing direct comparisons to leaders in Ghana's history. But I guess it also just allows her to take some more liberties particularly with stuff to do with, sort of government and, rulers there and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it definitely felt weird that she would change the name, but not really bother to change other aspects of it a bit more.
Yeah, initially I felt that maybe she was reluctant to say Ghana because she might have been a little bit anxious that Ghanaians wouldn't come for her. But then I remember she's Nigerian, so she's not going to be afraid of any of the Ghanaians anyway. So
But what is it that she's written that would make Ghanaians come for her? I mean, I don't find anything that's controversial.
Personally, I prefer it that she's changed the name, even though I wish she'd chosen something that was a bit more easy to say and all the rest of it. But I would find it a bit strange that you choose a real country, you use loads of stuff about that country, but you put in a false president. To me, that wouldn't work. I'm much happier that she's changed the name. And I guess it gives her the liberty to, if she has made any mistakes about Ghana, well, it's not Ghana, is it? So, she can get away with that. I think, you mentioned another time that she should have made it more composite African country that wasn't easily identified with Ghana. And I think that would have been even better. But I wouldn't have been happy if she'd called it Ghana, personally.
Fair enough. So yes, all the main characters are dysfunctional.
Are they?
Well, true or false? The question is, so you let me tell me, are they? Are they not?
I just see her as ordinary. Like most people, you got positives, you got negatives. I mean, it's not like she's some kind of serial killer. So I didn't really consider her to be dysfunctional. Just for what she just.
But she's quite. So this is Anna we're talking about, right?
Yes.
But she's quite closed and guarded and doesn't really express herself.
Isn't that normal?
Is that normal?
Yeah.
I think it's dysfunctional within normal limits, personally. I think she's a sort of averagely, like most of us, dysfunctional person.
I wouldn't say Anna was dysfunctional. I mean, I'd say she's a bit boring. Her husband, Robert, he's quite normal. I mean, he cheated. That's normal. And men who've been in marriages for over 26 years do cheat. And the only one I thought was a bit strange was the daughter, only because of the conversations, because she's in her 20s, but sometimes she comes across like really young, like she's a teenager. Okay, she's got this, because she's practically bullying her mom into this divorce.
Yeah.
And for me, she comes across as almost teenager-like, as opposed to someone who's in her 20s and working and has been to India and to all these places. She doesn't, her conversations with her mom don't come across as someone who's quite mature in her 20s. She actually comes across as someone with a little bit of a teenager. But then on the other hand, she's an only child.
Yeah.
So she could be a little bit spoiled. So that's not dysfunctional either. She's perhaps has had a lot of attention on her.
But she's also grown up with her mother, who is really quite closed and hasn't given her that much attention. But the other thing, she also has we assume that she has an eating disorder. I mean, she had an eating disorder. We're not sure that she's gotten over it yet, because her mother's constantly asking her about whether she's eating. I think,
Does that make her dysfunctional? I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, I felt like from what we saw of people, the characters in the UK felt almost more dysfunctional than the characters than Anna's kind of other family. Like, I thought that her siblings, her half siblings, felt a bit more fully realised as people, and maybe a little bit. And despite growing up, with Kofi as the great dictator as a father, they just seemed more together as people, I guess, compared to kind of Anna and Rose. And
I wasn't sure about the whole issue of the daughter bullying Anna or Nana or whoever she wants to be. I felt as if the daughter has she had a strong opinion, and the mother seemed to want someone to tell her what to do. That's the way I viewed it.
You see, I didn't think so. I thought that the daughter wanted her to the daughter took sides. But then after Anna left and went off to Bahama to do her thing, she then started, and then she disappeared. Then she then started speaking to the father, and then now went onto the father's side. And I think I do agree with you, Yvonne. She seems quite naive and not very grown up. But I don't think that she bullied Anna. I think that Anna did not want to get a divorce. And yes, she did go to the lawyer, but actually she still decided that I'm not going to go ahead with it. So I think, although she tried to bully her, I think that Anna wasn't falling for it. She was actually doing what she wanted to do for herself.
Maybe you're right. In which case, if you are right, although I don't say that you are, but if you are right, then I say that Anna is easily bullied. She just seemed directionless.
That I do agree with. I do. Until she goes to Bahama, I think she just really didn't know what she was doing with her life. I mean, what has she actually done with her life? Nothing.
She was an architect. She very briefly she got married. She raised a family. She has a daughter and she's a housewife. And that's something. I mean, her personality is hardly inspiring. And this is why I find it really surprising. I don't know if you call it growth or it's just a switch, because the way she was very direct with her father and quite demanding of answers. And, I found that really surprising, because the first half book, she comes across as not that interesting or interested in anything. And even she says herself, when she's reading her father's diary, there's a part where he's being encouraged to join all this stuff, and she's willing him not to. She comes across as quite passive in the first half of the book. Then the second half, she has found her voice, but maybe that's the growth.
Do you think that she's been 26 years in this rather boring marriage? It doesn't sound like a lot of change took place in that time. But when she goes, and she is like in a rut, but and no doubt that's why she doesn't really know what she wants to do about the divorce or whether she wants to go through with it. She's still working all that out. But then she goes to a completely different country. She's in a different setting to anything she's been used to before. It gives you the opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself, doesn't it? So maybe, nobody's got any expectations of how she normally talks, how she normally behaves. She can be direct in a way which some of us thought was quite rude towards her father.
I think that's a really interesting perspective on it, that she was freed in some way. But I don't know, I feel like for me it still feels like we weren't given enough to find it really believable, that someone that had led quite a closed, small life would be so fearless. Like traveling, doesn't seem like she's ever been to Africa before. So there's just something about how unbothered she was, both about challenging Kofi, but also about the warnings that she'd get, from other people, like, there's an election that might be coming and it's like, maybe you should leave, or just different things that we can say that they were kind of overblown, like, or those warnings, or just a bit stereotypical about what might occur in Africa. But either way, for someone that had led quite a small life, I would say, maybe hadn't travelled that much or never been to Africa, for her to feel so unbothered, and so just to kind of walk around and sort of speak to him as she will, even when she's being warned by her half brother about how she's speaking to him and the way she's challenging him, and all kind of trying to kind of say to her, maybe you should apologize, maybe you're taking a bit of a risk here.
I think you're right. I mean, I'm sort of speculating on a possible scenario, but the book doesn't give us any information about her interior life, does it? So we can speculate, but there's no real evidence in the text to kind of, substantiate it, really.
I mean, it's not even what she says as well, it's what she does. I mean, the first day she arrives in a foreign African country, yes, she's met Ken before, and suddenly she's having a little bit of fun as a tourist on the very first day she arrives in a foreign country. I thought, this is so out of character. I mean, given what I'd sort of known about her in the first half, it just seemed like a complete shift.
Yeah, but what people do on holiday remains on holiday, doesn't it?
But then her daughter thinks that she's completely lost it, doesn't she? Because of all these things that she's doing that seem to be out of character. So I think that's one of the things that if her daughter had found out, your daughter would think, okay, we're definitely checking you into some kind of institution. Right. So, and we haven't mentioned Francis Agri yet.
I liked his diary. I liked learning about him as a student and what he experienced and how he viewed things, particularly as, he's not just a black man, he's coming from a place of struggle with his mother having to pay his fees and all the rest, and how he's approaching his studies and the weight of being the only child of his mother, certain expectations on him, etc., etc. So I had to force myself not to skip to the diary entries to try and find out, okay, how is he living his life? He seemed very interesting to me. I mean, by the time he became Kofi, I'm less interested in him because he's going to follow, or I assumed he's going to follow the traditional kind of African long-term, emperor for life kind of, that normal route. So he's less interesting to me. But I liked Francis and how he was developing his thoughts and as a person in this strange, cold, land.
Yeah, I thought the diary entries, I think, were the most enjoyable parts of the book actually to read. And I thought that a lot more work went into that, because you get his thoughts, you get a feel for what was happening in the UK at that time. And so for me, I really enjoyed that part of the book. And I also like the fact that it wasn't linear when it came to the diaries. So we've mentioned dictators and cheating. So I think I'll go with the cheating first. All men cheat, and women should just accept it as a fact of life. True or false?
Maybe.
Perhaps.
I like the approach of her half sister, the judge.
Yes.
He cheated on you. Is that all? It's just
At least he didn't beat you.
Yeah, very pragmatic, very kind of so.
But it is an acceptable thing within many African communities, isn't it? That the man will cheat. You have a girlfriend, in the next town.
So does that mean the issue then is about whether you get caught or not?
No, it's not even that you get caught. It's that the woman knows, but she just learns to live with it.
Because I think even if you talk about some of the minor characters like Blessing and her husband, it's all part of his diary. So Blessing and the husband was the Rhodesian Thomas Peary, who clearly had a lot of clandestine engagements with other women. And then I think Anna, when she went to visit her, attempted to highlight that, he had many women, and it didn't seem to sort of faze Blessing in any sort of way. Like, yeah, this is normal, we've, then I arrived and he stopped. So next story.
She thinks that he stopped.
It's interesting you mentioning that exchange, though, because I found the exchange interesting, but at the same time, it didn't seem realistic to me, where she came back with you're trying to hurt me by trying to reveal to me something that my husband was doing, which I would have known about anyway, kind of thing.
Why don't you find that realistic?
I felt she wouldn't have, although obviously it's kind of like almost, that's a device. I would have felt that she would have probably just slapped her. You've come into my home, I'm accommodating you by allowing this exchange of information, and you're now trying to bring all this crap, which I know about anyway, which you don't know whether I know about. You're just trying to bring this in, to my attention. For what reason? My husband's already dead. So, what is the point of giving me this information? Clearly, it's not to uplift me. It's just to bring me down. But then again, I guess the other argument is, well, wouldn't you rather know rather than being ignorant?
Yeah, but he's dead. What purpose does it serve?
I can't remember the exchange exactly now, but doesn't she kind of apologise a bit? Because they're having a little set to, really, aren't they? There's something else that happens. I mean, it's quite unnecessary and it's rude. I'm glad that the wife doesn't lose her dignity by slapping her.
Yeah, but she only apologised after she retaliated.
Oh, yes, but retaliate, yes, but not actually slap. That's a bit common, isn't it?
Instant reaction.
I mean, the question is, do all men cheat? I mean, that's really a big one.
I think that's a little bit of a sweeping statement, isn't it? I think while we know it's common and some of us may choose to learn to live with it, it doesn't mean it's really the norm, or it should be it might be very common, but I don't think it should be considered as a norm that we go into a marriage expecting to happen, even if when it does, we cope.
But actually, what I found interesting actually was the fact that yes, they'd been married for 26 years, and Robert, her husband, kept on saying, well, I did this one thing. What about all the 26 years that we've lived together? We've raised a child, we've probably holidayed and all this. Don't they account for something? And I imagine this is what married women would have to go through and decide. If your husband does have an affair, what if you've been married to him for 40 years and he's just had an affair with someone for a month or two? Do you let him go and therefore let go of all the 40 years and all the memories? Maybe he's helped you bury your parents. Maybe you've raised kids and they've gone to university. And so it's a very complicated thing. But
it is, isn't it? And I would have said that on each case, affairs can take so many different shapes and forms. And so if it was me anyway, I'd be looking at it in an individual way, not just like, oh, he's strayed and that's it. And after all, none of us, we may not stray, but that doesn't mean that we're faultless, does it, in a marriage? So there's a lot to consider, I would have said.
I think the question is specious anyway, isn't it? I mean, if you couch the question as in, do all married people cheat, then fine, we can debate that. But, when you've already loaded it against, come on, you have to agree with me. It's a specious argument. Question.
So monogamy, some people believe, is a Western concept, and that actually we are trying to force ourselves into a life that is not traditionally African. And so this idea of monogamy is un-African. And I just wonder what you think about that.
Monogamy on both sides is un-African, so for women as well? Or?
Yes.
What, serial monogamy?
Well, okay, I'll give you an example. I think in Kenya, they're now doing this thing where they call ethical monogamy, where you are in a long-term relationship, but you can stray as long as you tell your partner about it. And this applies for both men and women.
So is that straying then?
Well, you are going outside your relationship, aren't you?
I think all that is totally unacceptable.
I think the whole thing of polygamy is, in days gone by, there are various things that had to be accepted because of what was, how society worked. Just the same as like in Europe, it might not have been polygamous marriages, but women put up with their husbands running around because they didn't have an option on it.
Yeah.
But I think that, I know quite a lot of people who've been in polygamous marriages, through relatives. I don't think any of the women really think it's a great idea. They might come to terms with it. They might live in it. They might even find convenient aspects to it. But I don't think anybody, if you ask the woman, there's that theory, isn't it, that the first wife is meant to agree in, but I doubt that many of them agree willingly, unless they really don't like their husband and maybe they were, forced into that and they don't really like him and they're pleased to see him clear off with, or, there's a young wife who can do more of the chores, but I don't think, especially nowadays, I don't think people choose it at all. And isn't serial monogamy or just having affairs becoming more the norm in Africa as well now, in cities anyway?
In Nairobi, they have what they call MBA, married but available.
I think that's quite nice. I think I quite like that.
What about societies where the woman has more than one husband, though?
They do exist. I think there's one is Fiji. There's a place either Fiji or near Fiji where it's actually the woman that has more than one husband. So they do societies. I'm thinking Malawi as well.
Really?
It's just that polygamy with the man with many wives is more common, isn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, moving on. Africa needs more dictators or should I say freedom fighters like Kofi Aje. True or false? I say true.
They start out well, but they don't end well.
Well, can we argue that Kofi Aje did not end well? He himself does say that, yes, he had all these good intentions. And from what is described in the book, he seems like he actually achieved a lot. There was free education. They had roads, they had bridges, they had electricity. So he seems like he actually has done a lot for the country, but even he himself says that he did most of that with his hands tied behind his back, because when he took over, he still had all these Western powers to deal with, and he still had to work within the constraints that they built around him.
Yes.
So I think that actually, as a dictator, he achieved a lot. And I do believe that Africa needs more people like him, because although they have a strong around power, he still did things to develop the country. So based on that, I actually think that if we had more people like that, we would be much further ahead than we are now. Because at the moment, we just have kleptocrats who they're only interested in lining their pockets.
My problem is the amount of time that he was in power for, because, the longer you're in power, the more likely it is to corrupt you. And very few men, if any, are saints. And, they remain above the ability to be corrupted by this power.
How long then do you think is enough time for someone to be in power to achieve their objectives?
Well, don't they always say that you have one term to kind of wet your feet, second term to consolidate, and that's it, you're gone. Maybe 3 terms max, but, not decades.
I mean, isn't it? It's really about succession planning, right? So if people like Kofi never want to leave, even if someone's making the argument they're doing good things for the country, kind of what happens when they do leave. So they should be able to make a case on their own merits, right? So if their approach is doing really great things for the country, they should be able to kind of have people that want to follow in their footsteps, that could be voted in after them to kind of continue what they're doing. But yeah, that's not the way it plays out.
And I think that's the problem I have with dictatorship in particular, because there is no succession planning. And if you look at probably Zimbabwe as a case in point, I mean, it can be 10, 20, 30 years, and they keep changing the rules to remain in power. Yeah. And so it leads to abuse of power, misuse of power at the expense of citizens. And then, it leads to oppression, it leads to suppression of people and killing. That's the problem.
So someone like Kagame then, what are your views on Kagame? Given that Patel has decided Rwanda is a safe country to send refugees to seek asylum.
Absolutely a safe country. Have you not watched Hotel Rwanda? It's a very safe country.
Come on, that was before Kagame.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. He's built on the foundation of the genocide. So, it's like a utopia. It's a safe country. In fact, I'm planning on spending my next holiday in Rwanda.
Actually, you should. Rwanda is really beautiful.
People go and people enjoy it as a holiday. I haven't been myself. I'm sure it's lovely if you go for a holiday. I still think it's a bit spooky. And I'm not saying that as somebody who's been there. It's just the vibe I get off it. But I wouldn't want to be transferred to Rwanda without a significant cash sum to help me set myself up. It's all very well saying it's a safe country. It probably is if you don't involve yourself in any, certain political things. But how are you going to make a start without plenty of money? I don't know.
Are they not given money to?
Well, they're given some. I wonder how much. And, and I mean, just the language. I know English will be quite widely spoken and French is widely spoken, but only in the capital, I imagine.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure English is that widely spoken, because it was only recent that they adopted English as the national language.
And Swahili, but I don't think if you come from Syria and Afghanistan, you know much Swahili. So I'm sure it's safe.
This is the thing,
safe for Rwandans.
I think it's probably safe because, they probably have a strong government, but the problem is that there's no opposition, and I'm sure there's no criticism as well. So yes, they have innovation, but you are silenced, aren't you?
But this is the thing, right? Balance of probabilities. Would you rather have the situation in Rwanda or the situation in Uganda, for example? Uganda has a president that's been there over 30 years. It's a banana republic, basically. Everything's falling apart. The roads have potholes everywhere. The buildings that were there during colonial times are still there next to shining new buildings. The road to where I'm from is full of potholes. Basically, you get a bum massage for at least 2 hours as you drive through it. So would I rather have what you have in Rwanda, orderly roads, traffic lights that work, a whole lot of innovation, but a little bit of curtailment of my freedom, or have the situation in Uganda where I don't get that freedom anyway because the opposition still gets sent to prison?
But Jackie, outside of Kigali, how good are all the roads and everything?
They are actually really good. I have taken a road trip from Uganda all the way to Rwanda, and the roads are really, really good. You have a look at the landscape. We were driving along mountains and cliffs. The roads were all clear and they were all very well developed.
So I suppose both countries have dictators, but you're saying there is a twist. You can have a benevolent dictator. But they all started as benevolent dictators. That's how it starts. If you look at Robert Mugabe, he built schools, he built roads. He was and then somewhere along the way, power corrupts. And they say absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so we need to watch the space and see which direction Rwanda is going.
And then that succession planning that Amina was talking about really does come into play. Mm-hmm. If we wait and see whether he actually has any succession planning in place.
So it's safe as long as you're pro-Kigali then?
Yeah.
Yes, because I remember having a conversation with a guy in a cafe and he had to look left and right before he told me about not being able to criticize the government.
You're Rwandan?
Yeah, he was Rwandan, yeah. But still, I think given the choice, I would choose the situation in Rwanda. So, what was the statement?
Something about a benevolent dictatorship.
Oh, does Africa need more dictators like Kofi Adjei? I think I made a strong case for Kofi Adjei.
I'm ambivalent.
I think deep down he was a good man. He had good ideas and he was trying and he tried. And he did step down. He didn't wait to be pushed out. He actually stepped down.
But remember, he was talking about maybe going back.
Because the current person wasn't achieving very much.
I'm just going to say he's a fictional character. I mean, okay, yes, if you can get him, that's fine. But I'm not sure that it's a good idea to have people stuck in power for long periods of time. Although, yes, sometimes, they're trying to, they mostly start off trying to achieve good things. And even when, like if you take Mugabe, from the little I know about it, it's not just about Mugabe, is it? It's about the people around him, and they then line their pockets, even if he's trying to do the right thing. It sets a way of thinking for people, doesn't it? That it's okay to just be there and take advantage of it.
So you're saying like Boris Johnson?
Exactly. The things that are wrong with Uganda, according to Jackie, I'm sure we have pre-colonial buildings over here, and some of them ought to be...
They're not falling apart, though.
Oh, and some of them are falling apart. If when I was in Tanzania, we were complaining bitterly about how long it took to get, teaching permits and work permits and residency permits, and the ages it took and all the money you spent on emergency permits because you didn't have your real permit and various other devices. But you try dealing with the Home Office here and getting a permit. It's quicker in Tanzania. Believe me, it's quicker.
Uh-huh.
When you come back here and then you realize, just like trying to get your passport at the moment seems to be a long job. There's not that much difference that we used to be thinking there was.
Jackie, I feel like no one should be in power for more than 10 years in anything. Not just government, but even CEOs. I think even in companies, people run out of ideas. They run out of fresh ideas, and you need someone new to come in and just rejuvenate and re-energize a government, a company. So I think it's not a good idea for Kofi to be going back into power or campaigning again, because what else is he going to bring? Old ideas? No.
I agree with you. Every organization needs new blood and fresh ideas, because the younger generation have their own views on how they want to be led. I do agree.
And he had that opportunity himself, didn't he, as a young person, to come in and shape the future of the country, but that's an opportunity denied to other young people and younger generations if he stays.
What's wrong with being like Madonna, just going on and on and on, and then just reinventing yourself by associating with younger artists?
I think on that note, I'll move on. So everyone with a black ancestor, no matter how far back, is black. True or false?
Only if they look black.
No. So Taiwo says only if they look black. What does everybody else think?
If they can pass, does that mean that they are still black if they're passing as white?
But okay, so let's then examine passing. Why are we calling someone who looks white and a similar upbringing? Why are we calling that passing? Why can't they just be white?
Because there's gatekeeping for what it means to be white, but there's not gatekeeping for what it means to be
I don't think that's quite true, though, because it's true if you live here, perhaps, and probably in America and most of Europe. But if you live in Africa, that's the whole thing with the Sankofa book, isn't it? She found herself to be considered white. And so I think the gatekeeping depends on where you are in the world. Mm-hmm. I taught a little girl who her mother, who also worked in the school, told me, this child looked black, her skin color was, most people would say black. I don't even remember whether it was very dark or not so dark or what, but it was nothing to make you think anything about it. Her mother eventually was talking to me one day, and it turned out that the father of this child was he was half Greek or half something that was European. And the mother was relieved that her daughter had turned out normal. So there you go. Her daughter looked normal.
What is normal?
Well, that's what I said. I was joking, and she couldn't get it. I kept saying, "Oh, normal. Okay, normal. So what's normal then?" And normal, like me, meaning herself. So it depends entirely upon where you live in your society around you, I think. But anyway, my views are not always considered appropriate, so perhaps I should keep quiet, really.
They sound very appropriate to me.
Well, some people want to insist to me that the one drop rule, which I didn't know we had in this country, is how society sees it. Now, I don't know because I suppose I'm not a very typical white person. So it's a bit hard for me to make a judgment on it anyway.
It's so funny because I've got a cousin who is very, very pale. His mother is black, his father is white. And his mother basically drummed into him that as long as you've got one drop, you're black. But the problem is when he's walking in the street, and this is why, in a way, I agree with Taiwo, it's how you look. Because, if you're walking down the street, it's how people will say, I mean, if I walk down the street, they'll say, there goes a black woman. Now, could I then walk around saying, well, actually, I'm really white? It's what people see. And people define you before you even define yourself sometimes, So, yeah, it's a tricky one. But I think how you look and therefore how you're viewed by society around you plays a really important role. And therefore, if you're in Africa, you might be seen as that white woman, whereas you're here, it's that black woman.
That must be quite confusing, though, for a person.
Must be very confusing.
Because an albino in Africa is not considered a white person. An albino is still considered a black person.
Yeah.
Even though they may look kind of white, even if their features are still maybe black.
Yeah.
And it's confusing for people who've grown up here, who then go to Africa and see themselves viewed in a different way. And sometimes they don't like it. I mean, I think my kids, they laugh really. They think it's just kind of funny, but they don't have to live there for long periods. They've only been on holidays, so it doesn't really matter. But I was working with a person who grew up over here, and her mother was from Tanzania and her father was an white English man. And it upset her that people didn't really view her. They viewed her as Mzungu, as a white person. And she thought she spoke Kiswahili, but I think in actual fact, she didn't really speak it very well. So that was noticeable as well for, people were dismissive. She doesn't speak properly. And it was very upsetting for her, I think.
Sharon, just to summarize, if you could write one more chapter after the ending, what would you write?
Well, I want to know what's going to happen the next time she tries to go to the airport.
If she's going to be able to leave.
Yes, if her father's got her and seems quite happy to have her there, whether he's going to let her go.
So basically, your ending would be that she's held hostage in Bahama for the rest of her life.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure she managed to break out eventually.
For me, I think I would want her to go back to the UK because I wonder what happens to her marriage. Because I imagine having spent all this time with her father and her half-siblings, and just that whole life in Africa has changed her in some way. And so her relationship, I imagine, with Robert is going to be very different. She's probably not that timid, submissive person anymore. And so does she take him back? Does she not? And if she does, how does that relationship change?
I have no idea, to be honest. I felt that maybe her daughter would join her and they'd have some serious jollies on the ex-president's private jet.
Have fun. Okay. I would turn her into a Wayo priestess.
What does that mean?
The priestess at the end who she goes to see.
Oh, really?
My ending would be that she's so enthralled by the whole thing and captivated by the whole thing that she actually decides that she's going to be a priestess herself and stays in Bahama for the rest of her life, practicing whatever magic it is that the priestess practices.
I'd be interested in seeing her daughter Rose go out there and seeing Kofi deal with her. I think that would be quite interesting to see.
That would be. Ratings out of 5. How would you rate the book out of 5 and why?
Well, that's easy for me. It's a 3.
Why is it a 3 and not a 5?
How can it be a 5? It's not David Olusoga.
Okay, so David Olusoga is now the person that you have to basically emulate.
He's the benchmark. He's the only 5 I've ever given.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that was a one-off.
All right. I'm sure you've given another 5 before, but...
No. I'm sure I haven't. It's a 3 because I enjoyed reading it. It's a fluff piece. It's neither good nor bad. It's middle of the road. It's better than The Spider King's Daughter, much better. But it's not yet where it needs to be in terms of, it's not yet where it needs to be in terms of the next book. So, yeah.
I'd give it a 3 because all the things we've talked about, which, are interesting and we've got from reading it, they're not really explored in the book at all.
No.
So, yes, it's a fun, quick, light read when that's what you need. But all the interesting areas that could be explored are what we've done.
I think I'd give it a 3 as well. And I think for me, it was a quick read. I really enjoyed Francis / Kofi as a character, and there were enough bits that I liked. But I feel like there were books that do all the different components that this was trying to do better than it does. There are books that do the kind of family history better. I'm speaking about the Ghanaian family sort of sagas like Homegoing, just lots of other books that do these topics a lot better. But a nice enough read, so that rounds out at 3.
I think I'd give it a 2.5 out of 5. I mean, it was simple. There were moments of greatness, but they were very few and far apart. I must say I liked the part where she goes to the carnival with her auntie, who I loved, by the way, and then she sees all these black people, and she's, "Are we in Africa?" I burst out laughing because that was quite funny. But there were not that many moments like that. So,
what about when she was exhibiting her art, and then someone was saying something? The journalist or whoever, art critic, was saying something about why haven't they not got faces?
You're painting a lot of white women, but you're a black woman. And she says,
black women.
The woman that asked the question was black.
Yes.
And she says, because my mother is white. And then, of course, the auntie says, she can F off paint whatever she wants.
I thought that was classic.
I loved the auntie. I love the aunt. Yes.
Yeah, she's a character.
So just 2.5 for me, I'm afraid.
I think if I'd read this before the other 2 books that I read before this, I probably would have given it a 2.5 as well. But I'm going to elevate it to a 3 because I thought it was a quick read. It was enjoyable. It explored lightly some really important issues like colorism, colonialism, activism. And yes, she could have explored a whole lot of them in a whole lot more depth, and that would have been, for me, a much better book had she done that. But overall, I think, enjoyable. I don't know if I want to read another book that's on the Reese Witherspoon book club list. But so anyway, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, and I shall see you next month.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jackie.
Stay well, everyone.
Later, have a great evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please like, share or subscribe on Spotify, YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Till next time, goodbye.